Funding for Building New York is provided by First American Title Insurance Company of New York.
Welcome to Building New York. My name is Michael Stoller. How does a Chinese history major who wants to go into international law, who comes to New York in 1995, become one of the largest landlords of office buildings in Lower Manhattan? How does the San Francisco kid embellish and love New York and tell us everything about New York? I'm fortunate today to have Kent Swig, the principal of Swig Equities, also partner of Tierra Holdings, Brown Harris Stevens, Halstead Properties, as my guest. Thank you for being here, Kent.
It's a pleasure.
You grew up in California and you went to Brown University. And your major was?
Chinese history.
Why Chinese history?
Well, I'm one of those, I guess, that went to undergrad and thought it was an interesting idea to study something that was really of interest to me. And I took a survey course at Brown my first year. Just a bunch of friends took Chinese history, thought it would be something of relevance to go to, and went to the one course and finished it, wanted a little bit more the next semester. And one course led to two, led to three, and ended up majoring in Chinese history, which was fascinating.
You graduate Brown University. You return to California. You go to University of California at Hastings Law School. And your major was?
Well, just law.
Law,
well,
but
mostly I wanted to do international law.
You wanted to do international law. And then what happened?
Well, I was proceeding on my way to going to China. I'd lived in China before I went to law school for about 5-6 months, and I was on my way to working in international law and working in China. They had a program back in the early 80s, mid-80s, with bringing over law students into mainland China to teach them about the law and to go through and teach Western law and start to adapt that to basically the Chinese culture. My father at the time, my family's been in real estate since my grandfather started a firm in 1936. And he wasn't feeling well, had cancer at the time, and asked me not to go into practice of law, but instead to work in my family's business. And I ended up going there for about a year.
And what year was that?
That was 85, I guess it was.
But you were in San Francisco. You worked for Cushman & Wakefield.
Yeah, I went to work for my family for about a year. My father was feeling better. Then I went to work in Cushman & Wakefield for about 18 months. I was working in the financial services group in San Francisco, selling office buildings, residential buildings, land, and also working out of Cushman's Los Angeles office.
And then suddenly you find a deal and you decide to make a phone call to a New York City investor?
Well, before that, I went back to work with my family. My father had another round of cancer, which he recovered from and ended up living actually 10 years after, so that was good. But I ended up working back with my family, and we were in the midst of doing a deal to buy a property in Long Beach, California, Southern California. And we had a partner who at the last moment, quite literally 2 weeks before we were supposed to close, backed out of the deal, decided he just didn't want to do it. And then did some calling, cold call somebody in New York City, basically, to see if they wanted to venture a deal with us.
And who was this individual that you cold called?
This guy named Harry Macklow from the Macklow organization, and put in a call to him. The president of our family's firm knew him, so gave me the introduction. I called. It seemed like a logical play for him. that he was very aggressive, and I was an avid reader of everybody in the real estate industry. He seemed like he was one of the most aggressive players in the marketplace, so called him up, introduced myself, said, maybe, I don't know if you've heard of my family's business. He said, yes, of course. I said, we've got a property in Southern California, and I thought that it would be of interest to you.
So how did you come to New York?
How did I come to New York? Well, I guess the first time I came to New York, I was 10 years old, and I went with my parents, and it was the first time.
When did you come to New York to live in New York?
When I was 10, it felt that way. It was the first time I ever felt comfortable in a place in my life, was really when I got to New York when I was 10. Then when I came to New York, I moved here. The first time was in 1986. In August of 86, I moved here for 3 months working on properties that my family owned, and then eventually moved back here in July of 87.
Now, you moved back in July of 87. Were you married at this time?
I was married.
And who were you married to?
I was married to my present wife, Liz Swig.
Who happened to be Harry Maclow's daughter.
It did, and does.
And when you came back here, you weren't working in the family business. You were working in the other family business.
Yeah, I came back here. I worked with the Maclow organization for about 7.5 years until April of 94. And then struck out to do some deals.
So it's April of 1994, a very difficult time in the real estate business. And at that time you're what, 45 now?
I am.
So at that time you were 33?
Uh-huh.
At 33, you decide to venture out in the cold world of real estate. And what did you do? What was your first thing you did in 1994?
Found office space. I did all the things that one does when you start a company, become an administrator. Xerox machines, office space, telephone systems.
But what about the first piece of real estate?
What did I do? I did brokerage. I bought 22 units in Tudor City that were taken back by the bank, and I was able to go close on those units. And then I was doing brokerage deals, representing tenants in the marketplace. A firm called Picard and Abramson. I think I moved to 6,000 feet. At 1185 6th Avenue was the first deal I did, and did a lot of other brokerage deals and very slight acquisitions, and then got into some other things.
It's March of 1995,
right?
And you, with Will and Arthur Zeckendorf, Eric Hadar, and one other partner,
and David Burris,
decide that you're going to buy a prominent name in the management. And you decide to buy Brown Harris Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
How did you decide to do that?
Well, I had gone to lunch with Will and Arthur Zeckendorf in November of '94. Went through what I was doing in the business, what they were doing in the business. Our families had been partners back 3 generations. And we were both saying that we were confronting similar issues. It was a very poor marketplace. As we did buy property, we would take on the operations of it. So we'd spend a lot of time doing the operations, which took us out of the marketplace to really try to buy properties. If we hired a lot of people to run it, we had to pay them, and we didn't really have the resources to engage a lot of people on staff. And it was this battle of, how do you grow the business between your, spending your time and your resources. And I was saying one of the things I wanted to do was to buy an operating company and get a platform and a foundation on which to build, which was very much what they were looking to do. I said I'd heard of one company that might be available, and we were sort of exploring that. Then Arthur Zeckendorf heard about Brown Harris Stevens, and they had called me up and said, would you be interested? I said, absolutely. And we joined forces together, David Burris and I, and Will and Arthur. And we brought in Eric Hadar to join with us, and we ended up acquiring the firm from the Helmsley organization in March of '95.
And when did you buy a building? You owned the Tudor City.
Yeah.
When did you start becoming the Kent Swig that I know, who owns a lot of Lower Manhattan?
Well, the first building David Burris and Will and Arthur Zeckendorf and I bought was in August of '95, which we bought 770 Lexington. And
that's about a block away from Bloomingdale's.
Right, it's diagonally across the street from Bloomingdale's. So we purchased that, and then we did that, a lot of it for the ease and of the operation for Brown Harris Stevens, because Brown Harris Stevens needed office space. We were all over the Helmsley building at the time, and we wanted to consolidate offices,